So the next agenda item is the west side, and this is what's a lot of the residents here tonight have concerns about. So we can start with the tennis courts. In regards to the tennis courts, there are pictures in the survey online. Let me shrink this down. Bear with me as I'm moving through several different documents.
Can I say something, Mike?
Yep.
Well, Kevin's finding that two other points that have been made,
Mike.
that, again, I want to make sure people are clear. One is that somehow the board had made some kind of statement that we would be willing to put 8 tennis courts in on the property if we could. And as far as any of us can remember or could find, that was never said. It was requested. Would we consider replacing the tennis courts? And if we did, could we put 8 courts in? The second thing is, and somebody said it today, we spent a lot of money, upgrading the tennis courts. What we've done over the last couple of years is spend a limited amount of money we could to keep the tennis courts in a condition that they weren't unsafe. Those tennis courts are, from what our architects and tennis court designers, they reached out, told us, are way past their life. They would have to be torn out completely and replaced. They cannot be repaired again. So when Kevin's bringing this up, consider the fact that we never talked about putting 8 here, and we've never done any substantial upgrades on those. All we've done is enough repair so that there weren't cracks that kids would trip on and try to keep the balls from bouncing in the wrong direction.
So we had several concerns. This has been on our radar probably before I've gotten here. I know a lot of the tennis parents came last year to really voice a concern about the current status of the tennis courts. As you can see, we have several cracks throughout the tennis courts to where our tennis courts are at two different elevations right in the middle of several of the playing surfaces. This is another example of those cracks. So what we've been doing on a yearly basis, we spend anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 to have somebody come in, grind those cracks down so where they're somewhat level, and then we just patch over them. So the repairs that we did to get through this year, we have to do again this summer. I don't know if we have pictures of it. You can see all the cracks and how they just continue to play off each other. I don't know if I have a picture of the drains. All of our drains are raised. Because the ground has settled so much and they're so old and they're so worn down, the picture here in the right-hand corner that's also online, these are a lot of our drains. Our drains sit higher where normally your drain should be the lowest point of your surface so all the water flows down into the sewer and into the drain. Our drains are higher than the surface. Probably in some areas 2 to 3 inches higher. So that's become a significant tripping hazard, especially because most of them are on the back line or near the back line when students can be running for a ball. We did have even one student during tennis camp last year step through the grate and fell through and had to get stitches on their leg. So these are a life safety condition. They will have to be replaced under our life safety plan. Some of the residents have sent in emails that the courts are in good shape. Why are we replacing the courts? The courts are not in good shape. We do need to replace the courts. So again, as we're trying to deal, there's the picture of some of the things we have over our drains. We started to cut buckets and put them over the drains to try to make them a little safer. But that's not really a good idea. So again, one of the ideas, we currently have 6 tennis courts. A normal IHSA, it's ideal to have between 7 or 8 or even more. Some of your campuses that are in landlocked, most of them have 10 to 12 courts. We currently have 6. In order for us to put 8 tennis courts in, we would have to pave over the current green space because you couldn't fit the tennis courts. The other question is that's when I brought to the board the idea. So I called all 3 villages, the village of Brookfield, the village of Riverside, the village of North Riverside. Is anybody interested, or does anybody have any park space that they would be willing to allow the district to build their tennis courts on? And obviously we would work on an intergovernmental agreement. And Brookfield did not. The only green space they had available was in Ellert, which are not in district boundaries. They already have 4 tennis courts there. Obviously not enough for our tennis program. Riverside did not have the space. North Riverside had knocked down their tot lot at the same Veterans Park where our varsity, all of our softball levels and lower level baseballs already play. So they are willing to do an intergovernmental agreement with the district where the district would build the tennis courts at North Riverside. And it would be a 30-year intergovernmental agreement because that's about the life expectancy of a tennis court. And the idea would be that the school district would pay to put in the tennis courts. North Riverside would pay for the concrete work and the sidewalks all around it, the water lines around it, and the fencing around it, as well as the maintenance. So they would be responsible for resurfacing the courts every 3 to 5 years. So this was an opportunity, and would also give us an opportunity to put in 8 courts to meet some of the needs of our tennis program. Now, we've existed with 6 courts for the life of the high school. So can you live with 6 courts? You can. If we had a bigger space, you could put in 8 courts. We're somewhat landlocked. I know one of the tennis parents or some of the tennis parents came up tonight and spoke about some of the concerns. So we have a document. I received a copy of that letter that the tennis parents had about concerns about the tennis courts moving off campus. In the spreadsheet above are all of the sports that are at RB where they either compete or practice or both off campus. I don't know if I can make that any bigger. I'll try to make that a little bigger.
See the line on the bottom? Yeah, right there. It's not doing it.
So, boys cross country, girls cross country, boys soccer and girls soccer play at Elherd Park. When available, they compete at the school. Boys golf, girls softball, boys baseball, boys baseball, varsity and lower level. And already currently our girls tennis freshmen and sophomores already practice off-site, and then they compete at the school. There were some concerns about transportation. We anticipate right now the estimated transportation would be about $5,000 a year. Loss of practice time, I had Mr. Ostro answer some of the bullets that some of the tennis parents had concerns of. Loss of practice time, driving distance to Veterans Park is 1.9 miles, which is 5 minutes per Google Maps. Driving distance to Elherd Park is 2.3 miles, 6 minutes per Google Maps. So there's not a significant loss of practice time. There have been no reported issues with student athletes missing practice buses. This would be no different than the day of competition buses. I'm sure there's times where some things have to be worked out. We're already working that out with a lot of our athletes. If an injury occurs, a trainer reports. We do have 2 athletic trainers here. We do pay a stipend, and we do set it up so that we have 1 on-site and 1 off-site because we're already dealing with several sports that are already playing and participating off campus. Coaches do not transport injured athletes. In the case of an emergency, an ambulance is called, and the coach and/or athletic personnel would accompany the injured athlete. Veterans Park has a concession stand with a canopy for severe weather. Buses also provide shelter in the case of severe weather. We deal with this already with all the sports I showed you that deal with severe weather. In addition to the indoor bathrooms, which there are at North Riverside, there are also 2 porta-johns available for athletes. We currently use porta-johns here at RB because not all of our restrooms currently don't work in the facility at the stadium. Water bottles and water coolers are provided, as well as there are water fountains at the facility, and there would also be something that would be considered if we did build those tennis courts off-site. There are currently no lights on the RB tennis courts. Lights would not be required at Veterans Park to run an RB tennis program or by the IHSA. If the village ended up putting in lights, that would be something they would do and be responsible for. That's not something RB has at RB, nor would we want to do that at North Riverside. Currently, RB has 6 tennis courts. 8 tennis courts is ideal for running IHSA events. The current location cannot fit 8 tennis courts unless the district paves over the existing green space, which is used for shot put and discus during the spring season. So those are some of the concerns that we heard from the tennis court parents, and we wanted to make sure we addressed tonight. I could put that document online as well as the letter from the parents in regards to the tennis courts. In regards to the football stadium, this is something I did find in the documents you'll see online in the assessment. A large chunk of that life safety is the replacement of the football stadium and the bleachers. This was something in 2008. There was a document done by White, and it was identified back then, or in 2006, when they were beginning to do their assessment on the $60 million or $63 million project, that the stadium did need an overhaul. and that there were significant issues with falling concrete, exposed rebar, out of compliance bleachers, ramps. At that time, the district did not spend money on those items. They resurfaced the track. All they did was resurface the track with a very thin layer of track resurfacing, which has a life expectancy of 5 to 7 years, which is up. And I'll show you pictures of the track when we get to that in a minute. And they replaced the turf on the football field, and I'll cover that with you in a minute as well. Just some things we wanted to there's pictures again online. I'll do the best I can to highlight these for you. But I know those of you who have ever attended a game or who have kids here, we get complaints all the time. First of all, we have flooding issues. Every time, like today when we had a hard rain, or last week, what day was that? Saturday, I think it was, where we had the hard rain. All of our student athletes' lockers usually flood. That day we had the big rain, we had over 2 feet, foot and a half. We had to file an insurance claim for all of our track athletes and track equipment. We have several areas where the concrete is falling out of the building. Obviously, the whole concession stand area and visitor restrooms has been deemed unusable, which has been blocked off. So that's why when you see when you come to games, that middle section with that very steep ramp going down is closed off. All those the plumbing is not working anymore. The ramps are not compliant. So all of that has been deemed unusable. The exposed rebar cracks, the falling concrete, the tripping hazards around. This is the ramps upstairs by the home bleachers. So I don't think we need to spend. I know that those of you that have attended events or have seen that facility know we have several significant issues with that stadium. So one of the things, the thing that's causing an issue and why that's so expensive, I'm recommending to the board that we should just put up a traditional high school bleachers that you see at most high schools, the aluminum bleachers, that can hold 1,000 to 2,000 people, have your traditional press box. The problem that we have is that this houses all of our fall and spring athletes that are involved in outdoor sports. So we would need to put probably close to 300 lockers or 250 lockers in a building somewhere. So the best solution is not to, I don't think, is to build a concrete structure underneath the building. I think that would be a lot of money. I think I'm advising the board, and the board will ultimately make that decision, that we invest in just traditional aluminum bleachers and use the limited space that we have, either where the garden's at or in that other corner, kitty corner to the garden. We find some space that we can just build a cinder block building that can serve as restrooms and locker rooms for the athletes. In regards to the turf and the field, some have asked questions. They replaced the turf in 2005 or 6 when they did the renovations to the stadium. I want to bring this up. Double click on it, Mike.
Yeah.
All right. So when they replaced the turf in the stadium, they did that pretty quick over one summer, and I don't know exactly if they put enough drainage in or not, but Mike, why does that look so small?
Double click on the icon, it should open up.
And then go this way
There you go.
and drag it.
You make it bigger, too, just maximize.
All right. So this happens quite frequently when it rains. And your turf, you play soccer and you play football when it rains on your turf. Your turf shouldn't do this. It shouldn't be like a waterbed that bubbles up. And I don't know if you saw the beginning, but just today when we had that heavy rain for 15 minutes, we get the corners that rise on us all the time because we don't know if there's enough drainage built in around the whole exterior of the field and underneath the field. And what these turf fields are doing, listen, everybody's going to turf. The new thing is more college campuses and high school campuses are even turfing their baseball fields because of the less maintenance, rainouts, turfus, all that the supplies you need to put on those facilities. But we don't have that type of green space where we can do that. But underneath that AstroTurf is sand or gravel sand, treaded rubber. And so all that's kind of like your sub base, and then this carpet's laid on over the top of it. The warranty is for 7 or 8 years. Our warranty expires in September of this fall for our facility. So we've checked with that. They say, oh, well, it's not damaging your the way it's made is so that if there's not enough drainage underneath it, it can float and then it resettles down. The problem is ours is sometimes floating while we got kids on it. So the other problem is that we must have enough water under there where it's floating, where all of our sub base is being moved around and being distorted. So that's why sometimes when you sit in the stands or your kids complain about when they're playing soccer that they have the ball's not rolling right, is because it's peaks and valleys throughout the turf, because every time that thing rises, it settles differently. So one of the things we're looking at, as we're going to have to bring trucks in to demolish the concrete structure and to demolish the visitor bleachers and to resurface the track, is we should try to fix the drainage under the turf. It's out of warranty, and this, if you're going to be doing all these repairs, I don't know why they didn't do all these repairs back then, but if you're going to fix the turf, you should, and fix the track and fix the bleachers, you should try to do it in one whole piece. So that's the deal with the football stadium, the track and field. I do have pictures of the track. For those of you that are wondering, it's not in the life safety report, but it's in the capital improvements. It's common repair for the high schools that they do track repairs. I think it's on the same pictures as those, right, Joel? These are the visiting bleachers, and if you thought the basketball bleachers were bad, these bleachers are even worse. We've had a couple boards break when the visiting team's stands are full or the kids were jumping on them. We had a student did break through a board and fell through the board. These are, I could tell you this much, I remember attending games as a little kid since I grew up in the area at RB, and these are the same bleachers that have been there. So I know I'm 37, and I know I was like 7 or 8 when I came here, so I know they're over 30 years old. So we have some issues there. And as you can see, the boards there are cracking, and you can see the big spaces between the boards. I had pictures of the track, but basically the pictures of the track are no different than the pictures of an asphalt street. When the asphalt starts to peel up, we have to replace the asphalt. So we would need to definitely resurface the track. And the same token, as the tennis parents don't want us to move the tennis courts or would prefer to have 8 courts, I also have track parents from Boys and Girls Track calling and saying, every high school has an 8-lane track. Why don't we, if you're going to be redoing the whole stadium, why aren't we putting in an 8-lane track? We cannot fit an 8-lane track in our current footprint. There's not enough, we don't have enough green space. With the current buildings, we cannot build an 8-lane track. We have potential to possibly fit in a 7-lane track. That's something that would be one of those capital improvements that it's an optional project. The board would have to see how much that costs and if there's money to do that or if that's something that they want to do. These are other examples of our football field when we receive heavy rain. And I'm sure all of you are dealing with the same thing in front of your house. The reason you can see when these bubbles pop up is because that's already rising. And then this is all like a little lagoon around the different stadium and the track. So that all wears and tears on your track as well as that water sits on there. There's the pictures of the track where you can see there's no, and a lot of our residents, we do leave our track open for residents to use the facility, and a lot of you, we have received some concerns from residents asking when we're going to resurface the track because the running surface, it's not supposed to look like that. That's already, we're down to the sub base, which is just the normal concrete underneath the black track surface.
And no warranty left on anything?
There's not. This is like one of those repairs that Mr. Walsh had mentioned with your house. It's kind of like for anybody that has an asphalt driveway, every 3 years you need to seal coat your asphalt driveway. It's kind of the same thing with a track. Every 5 to 7 years you need to resurface your track. Am I right on that, Joel?
Absolutely, yeah, that's been my experience in numerous districts.
So this is not considered a life safety issue, but it's something that it's just a normal repair that school districts would budget for every 5 to 7 years. And the drainage, I think you understand the drainage we're trying to address with the redoing, as we redo the stadium, we're trying to build a locker room that's above grade so that the kids' lockers don't flood and the bathrooms don't flood every time we get any kind of rain. All that water that you see that builds up on the field spills off into our current locker rooms where the kids are at and house their equipment.
Kevin, could I add something?
Sure.
In terms of this drainage problem, it wasn't necessarily that when we designed the track and the stadium, it was done incorrectly. Part of this problem is just the fact we've had these 2 or 3 massive floods in the last 8 years. And no matter how this thing was designed, there's no way it could have prevented what was going to happen. So part of this whole proposal, we're not just doing drainage just to protect the field. I think it's a comprehensive proposal to include the building here and all the possibilities of possibly fixing things with check valves. But it may be that we can never totally fix this if the river overflows or floods as it has in the recent past. So I don't want everyone thinking like, well, they did a poor design job on this field. They didn't. The fact is, you know, that was 8 years ago. The field is basically run out on its warranty, and the same with the track. It hasn't been resurfaced, and you know.
So you're an expert on fields.
I've been here a long time, and I know that RB has. I'm not addressing it. Yeah. That RB has generally spent their money in a reasonable way. For instance, those bleachers that you see outside, the visitors' bleachers, that they were actually constructed by a couple staff members here, and a lot of it was volunteer time. The stadium is at least 60 years old, way past its prime. It's dangerous. In fact, this year during track season, a big chunk fell off from the ceiling. One of our kids could be under there, could have got hit, and actually died. So this isn't a trivial thing that we're looking at. It's not a luxury. This stuff, these facilities were not addressed. Unfortunately, we didn't have the money to do that when we redid the main building here. So I don't want people to think that we're being extravagant because we're not. The tennis courts are actually 35 years old. So Kevin, you're right that the life expectancy is about 30 years. I was here in '79 when they did the referendum, one of the referendums, and they passed and they redid the tennis courts. So they're past their prime. They need fixing. I personally believe if we're going to redo our facilities, we want to give our students the best, our coaching staff the best, at least standard as other schools. It'd be ideal to have the tennis courts here. I agree with that. If we are able and the board decides to move into North Riverside, I'd certainly push to have at least 8 courts there. There's no perfect solution here. We're really constrained, and we're going to do our best to make cost-conscious decisions looking at the long term.
Okay. So when we go to the parking,
Oh, if you have your hand up, you have to wait till we get to visitor comments again, please.
What point are we going to get to that?
It's on the agenda.
What time is that gonna be?
When we finish.
We're pretty close.
Yeah, we don't need
Close.
to reminisce about when you guys went to high school here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's cut out the reminiscing. and
so on the
keep
parking
that
in
to
regards to the parking on the west side of the campus, if in the event that the county were able to give us a fire lane, there were some questions on it. This is the special events parking lot. We currently have 85 spaces for students. We have 130 signed up for parking passes. We give 10 to 12 spaces a year to Hollywood School to use for their teachers and for some of their staff to have to go back and forth. If we were to build this lot, this would be student parking during the school day. We would be able to bring in revenue from this to offset the cost that we would still need to do for the teacher's lot. This also would this would provide us the parking on Rockefeller, and this lot here would provide us parking for the school and school events in addition to rentals when the gate is locked. So when we have events going on at the school like concerts and basketball games or events, and there's also holiday magic going on or Boo at the Zoo going on, or like when we have parent-teacher conferences and there's not enough spaces in this lot, this would provide us the overflow parking that we would need. In regards to financing this, So we would hope that the additional student parking would help offset the cost that we already pay for the teacher lot. The current student permits that we sell for this space here on Rockefeller basically gets us to a point to where we're close to breaking even on what we pay the village every year to use Rockefeller for the parking. In regards to how this would look, this is just a conceptual idea. I know there were concerns about lighting and landscaping and eyesore and all those things. I think there's a way that we can, if we do this project with the county and make a smaller lot, there's a way to do it aesthetically so that it's not just a vacant parking lot staring at the residents that live in the Hollywood section. I understand it's not the most positive solution, but it is a solution to address the parking concern that the district has had over the last several decades.
Do you want to say anything else about that?
That's all I have for that.
Before we go to the visitors' comments?
I
You could
just
say
said-
something after,
Say some.
after if you want to.
Well, one thing I want to point out, sort of separate from this facilities, is if we rent out the facility, the stadium, as you all know, to various entities, and we give discounts to in-district organizations, and we try to raise revenue as necessary. If people have certain complaints about who we rent to, that is certainly a legitimate complaint, and it can be brought to Kevin's attention. I just want everyone to know that we will.
Offsets from that, though, for taxes and revenue?
I'm sorry. So I just want my Hollywood neighbors to know that there are legitimate we will listen to legitimate complaints if you do not like some of the organizations that we rent the facilities to.
And what I would like to say, one last thing in the parking, I don't think, let me see if Matt will shake his head, that we're ever been in discussion, we were talking about trying to make parking available for the rental purposes we have. Our biggest parking problem is our students, our parents that come to normal activities here. And again, prior to this, a lot of the complaints from Hollywood was people taking up the space in their area. So, understand that. I agree with John. If there's groups that you think are creating a problem, feel free to let us know. I'm sure Kevin will be happy to talk to them. The other thing is, we are considering safety. I know people think it's not a consideration. One thing to consider is whether having more parking would actually have less people driving, because somebody drops kids off, they have to come back and forth twice instead of just one coming and back. So we're talking about safety and traffic. I'm not talking about whether kids should get driven to school or not. So, we are trying to weigh the people's concerns across the whole district.
So we have, another big thing is an issue is a lot on weekends, especially now in the summer with the summer camps that we have open to all of our K through 8 students from all 3 of our feeder districts, as well as we have a very big feeder swim team that a lot of our residents from all 3 districts participate in, as we have a big community gymnastics program that our students in our K through 8 feeder schools participate in. We get a lot of concerns from those parents that after school hours and on weekends or in the summer that the gate is locked and that they can't participate or have access to the facilities that their tax dollars pay for because they have no place to park, or their kids are too young where they can drop them off and let them walk through the building as a 5 or 6-year-old to get to the pool or to get to their gymnastics class, and they have no place to park. So we do get a lot of concerns about that, and we would hope that by having some additional parking, it would address some of those concerns as well. It's not just for special event parking.